What is up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Around. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach Kevin Smith. Coach, what's going on?
What's up, Jeff? Did you cook breakfast for your wife yesterday, Mother's Day? How'd you?
No, actually did on Monday.
Okay. Oh,
Monday, I
good for
gave her
you.
the day off. Sunday, we had some stuff going on. It was kind of a hectic day, but no, I did that. I did that. Did you?
I cooked for my parents, my wife's mother, my whole family. So I was, hooking up all the moms there in my family.
What do you, just out of curiosity, what are you making? You grilling? Are you doing like a whole dish in the oven? Like, how are you orchestrating that meal?
We did steaks and chicken on the grill and some shrimp cocktail and
Wow.
little pasta salad. My wife's a big fan of a good pasta salad. So
Nice.
yeah,
Good
it
for
was
you, coach.
all day affair. I had my work cut out for me.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, we're not here to talk about cuisine. We're here to talk about the National Football League. And for the vast majority of teams, I think all 32 teams, they are the rookie mini camps are in the rearview mirror. They're the camp invitees, the undrafted players, the drafted players. They've all come in the facility. They got their first reps in. And we're talking about the knee-jerk reaction to those workouts. Now, last week, we talked about what can you glean from these workouts, but especially in Cleveland, we want to talk about a couple of positions there and specific players. You know, reports out of Cleveland say that the number 5 overall draft pick, Mason Graham, was out of shape and unimpressive in last week's minicamp. At one point, he actually vomited on the field. But Shador Sanders, they say, looked fantastic. What do you think about these reports, and should we read anything into it?
I will quote my history professor at Gettysburg College. Whenever you said something in class that he disagreed with, he would say hogwash, which I don't really know what that means exactly. Hogwash. It just meant it meant he didn't agree. He didn't agree.
Yeah.
He thought it was BS. I'm not saying it's BS, but okay, maybe Mason Graham didn't look great. Maybe he didn't come in as in shape as he could have. Who knows? Maybe he was sick. I don't know what nobody offered you any clarification other than he threw up and he looked terrible.
Right.
And so, this is an acclimation process for all of these guys. This is a guy, Mason Graham, who was a star at Michigan. I mean, Jim Harbaugh was his head coach for most of his time there. I would imagine if you can deal with a Jim Harbaugh training camp, you're going to be able to survive rookie mini camp. So I don't know what the deal was there, but I would definitely not read too much into it, nor would I read too much into all the people who are gushing about Shador Sanders. I think that is going to be the most over scrutinized individual in this entire draft class, and that people are going to be trying to read into every little nugget. For now, if Shador Sanders looked decent throwing the ball in shorts and digested the playbook and ran the huddle well, then that's a win. And I wouldn't take anything more of it than that.
Well, you know who has to be absolutely livid is, and we saw this was going to be happening. Kevin Stefanski was getting asked questions about repetitions per quarterback between Dylan Gabriel and Shador Sanders at
Oh man,
rookie minicamp. Coach, it's only going to escalate from
I
here.
do not envy my friend Coach Stefanski right now.
Oh my gosh. I saw that, and you could see in his face, we're like, Coach, we saw that Dylan Gabriel got four reps with the second team, and Shador Sanders came in and got 3 with the fourth team. Is there anything to that? And he's like, guys, like, what are we talking about here? This is insane. It's only going to get worse. And unfortunately, we talked about this after the draft. The Browns have allowed this to happen by making the selections that they did. But I do want to talk a little bit, not just Cleveland specifically. There is a lot of knee-jerk reaction. Some of it is negative. You know, if a player drops a pass and it's caught on film by a reporter and it's put out there to social media, everyone's thinking this guy's going to suck. He's a bum. Meanwhile, I want to get your take on the New York Giants. They have been very open with getting information out there to the public. It's almost as if they want to justify them coming back into the first round and taking Jackson Dart. We got a lot of really interesting footage of Jackson Dart being grilled at the whiteboard, him working out with the team. Look, the teams can spin this. If they want to release it themselves, then hey, let's spin this in a positive light. Brian Daboll looks like he has a new lease on life with Jackson Dart there at camp. What was your takeaways from the New York Giants?
I saw some great stuff too on Cam Scadaboo and Abdul Carter. You're right. They were some teams. It was like radio silence, man. They were on
Yes.
lockdown, and others very much. It was almost like watching a Hard Knocks. I think with the Giants, Brian Dable in particular is pinning his future as their head coach to Jackson Dart. And they allowed him to move back up into the first round to get him. They're going to ride with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, at least early in the season, as their quarterbacks. If it doesn't work with Jackson Dart, then Brian Dable's done in New York.
Right.
And so I would think that anything that you can do positively right now and promote that is helpful in that process. So I wouldn't read much more beyond that, though.
Were there any other reports, teams, or anything that kind of struck you at one point over the weekend from minicamp?
Well, I'll tell you what, the one video that I must have watched 10 times was Tampa Bay Buccaneer rookie defensive tackle Desmond Watson going through drills.
Monster.
He's lost 30 pounds already since his pro day. Now, when you weigh 460,
it's a drop in the
you
bucket,
can drop 30 pounds pretty quickly. So this is going to be maybe the craziest thing we've ever said on the whip round. He's down to 430 pounds, or roughly you and I put together and then some. But he actually looked pretty good going through those drills, like pretty fluid. I don't know what a 430-pound guy should look like. I can't say I've really ever coached somebody that big, but he looked like a guy who could play on an NFL roster. He's going to be a fascinating story to follow.
Yeah. And so now there's typically a couple weeks until teams get into their phase 3 of OTAs, which also encompasses the mandatory minicamp aspect. And we'll be talking about that. But the knee-jerk reactions absolutely are happening after rookie minicamps. People are elated when they see a quarterback throw a touchdown in shorts, and they're disappointed when players don't perform. But that's neither here nor there. Let's talk about the big news last week, which this happened after we recorded, and we're both Steeler fans, but it's the George Pickens trade. The Pittsburgh Steelers sent George Pickens to the Dallas Cowboys for a 3rd-round pick in 2026 and a pick swap in 2027. The Steelers getting a 5th, the Cowboys getting a 7th. Just real quick, speaking of knee-jerk reactions, Coach, when you read the compensation and you saw that George Pickens was no longer a member of the Steelers, what was your knee-jerk reaction?
As a Steeler fan, I was totally fine with it because neither of us is in the locker room. We don't know what goes on. But when you read all the stories that have come out about Pickens and his behavior and attitude in Pittsburgh, the number of teammates that had no problem with him going, the fact that Mike Tomlin, who is a guy that has done everything he can to try to redeem players who have had some issues, that he allegedly was one of the ones who was advocating the most for this trade. When you hear all of that stuff, you say to yourself, boy, the problems with Pickens had to be significant. And granted, while the Steelers are going to lose a very nice football player on the field, I think you can find a way to replace the production elsewhere, or at least some of it, without all the headaches. And so for me, that was not a problem.
Now, let's talk about the compensation, though. A lot of people have asked this question, because I agree with you 100% that I was okay with the trade. I was okay with the trade once they acquired DK Metcalf from the Seattle Seahawks for a 2nd-round pick. The question is who won the trade? And I'll give you my take real quick, and that is that I don't think either side could claim to be the winner. The Steelers got rid of a wide receiver who could have potential of being an issue in the locker room. He was in the final year of his rookie contract. Who knows if he would have held out, held in, whatever you want to call it, if he would have been an issue leading up to the season. We also have no idea about the dynamic between he and DK Metcalf and whether that would have been copacetic. Nonetheless, the Cowboys, they get a receiver that they desperately need, another weapon for Dak Prescott, and then they're going to have to take on all of that other stuff that I just mentioned. Some would say that the talent outweighs the other baggage that he brings with it. I can't say there's a winner in this trade. I think both teams got what they wanted. The Steelers get a day 2 pick. They get rid of all the baggage. The Cowboys get what I just outlined. What about you, Coach? Do you think there is a winner in this trade?
I definitely would not use the term winner. The Steelers get rid of the baggage, but at the same time, here's another talented wide receiver that Pittsburgh has had to move on from because they couldn't get him right in the locker room, or they couldn't get him to embrace the culture. He's a 2nd-round pick. Here's another 2nd-round pick the Steelers will not be offering a 2nd contract to. It's hard to call that a win. You can make the addition by subtraction argument if you want, but it's hard for you to say that this was a success for Pittsburgh because ultimately they failed with George Pickens. Dallas, obviously, this is a TBD, right? We're not going to know how this turns out. We got to see how it plays out. But if you're Brian Schottenheimer, a first-year head coach, and you're Clayton Adams, a first-year offensive coordinator, whew, this is a big personality to take on. You got to get him right. We know he can play on the field, but we also know that his production isn't worth it unless you get him right in the locker room. And if Mike Tomlin couldn't do it in Pittsburgh, it's going to be a heck of a challenge for Brian Schottenheimer.
Who has the most pressure on them in Dallas, in your opinion? Is it Schottenheimer in his first year? Is it the offensive coordinator? Is it someone like Dak Prescott, who now has to manage CeeDee Lamb? They've had visible altercations on the sideline where CeeDee Lamb has not been happy. And now George Pickens. Who do you think has the most pressure on them in Dallas?
I think from in the immediate, it's probably Brian Schottenheimer, because when he got hired, a lot of people believed that this was sort of a placeholder, Jerry Jones puppet type hire. And the question really is, how much of a leash does he have? Did Jerry Jones hire him because he thought he was the best guy for the job, or because there wasn't any bigger name, anybody else that Jerry Jones really wanted? And if it goes bad early, will he be, quick to pull the hook? So I don't know the answer to that question. If we're being honest, the guy with the most pressure on him is Jerry Jones, because he hasn't produced a damn thing in 30 years. And since he became the GM, Dallas has just been one major disappointment. But when you're the owner, I guess the pressure isn't on, because you can do whatever the heck you want.
That's true. Yeah, and I don't think Jerry Jones cares. I mean, he's created this billion-dollar enterprise that is the Dallas Cowboys. I think he wants to win, but at the same time, he's laughing all the way to the bank. He doesn't care. A lot of these owners are like that. But we're talking about wide receivers: George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb. There's a million others we could bring up. It is by far, Coach, your favorite position. You love wide receivers. You love everything about it. I'm joking, obviously. There's some very thick sarcasm there. Wide receiver traditionally has been associated with diva-like behavior in the National Football League. What do you think makes the wide receiver position than others when it comes to player attitudes and behavior?
It is funny when you go down the list. If you think to yourself, who are some of the biggest divas to have played the game in recent memory? It's a litany of wide receivers, names like T.O. and Randy Moss and Des Bryant and Antonio Brown. Those names just come one after another. And receiver. I think there's a few things. One, the physical isolation of the receiver on the field puts a spotlight on that individual. I mean, when you pan into a football game, nobody's really noticing the guard. It's hard to see what's going on in the trenches. But out there on the perimeter, man, it's one-on-one. And so there's a lot of look at me by nature to the position. And then obviously the fact that you get the ball, you score touchdowns, you get paid a lot of money for all of that. You get a ton of attention. It leans towards a me first mentality. Also, when you think about the nature of football, everybody will tell you, well, how do you win football games? With blocking and tackling. Well, the wide receiver position, while blocking is included, very few wide receivers would identify as a blocker. Right. So they don't fit into the prototype that you're oftentimes describing when you talk about football players. So they are an outlier within the game of football itself, and often behave as such.
I think, dude, there's an element here that receiver is, not just on the outside, literally, but their success is contingent on someone else. And this isn't the running back, I mean, go back into the 90s, running backs were they were it. Like that, if you were running, everyone wanted to be the running back. Give me the ball, and I'm going to try and make someone miss, even if my offensive line isn't that great. Everyone knows what Barry Sanders did behind a very patchwork line in Detroit for all those years. But for the receiver, like the quarterback's got to give them the ball. They have to throw them the ball and not all the other litany of receivers that they have. And that's when, wasn't it Terrell Owens that said, just throw me the damn ball? Mm-hmm. I mean, it was just, look, just throw me the ball. It almost felt as if as we went into the 2000s, you had to talk about T.O., Chad Ochocinco is another one. They felt like they had to get loud to create look, you need to help me. It's like the Jerry Maguire, help me, help you. And so I think that because of that, they feel the need to have to try and promote themselves so that they get more attention and they get the football more. I think maybe who do you think was like the one that broke the mold for receivers? I would go with Chris Carter of Minnesota. I think he was like the first really loud receiver that screamed like, "Hey, I'm the guy. Give me the ball." I don't know. Do you have anyone else?
He did have a big personality, no question about that. And the amplification of the wide receiver as a diva has definitely coincided with the passing game replacing the run game as the preferred mode of moving the football, right? We didn't talk about a lot of these guys pre-90s as being divas because they were almost secondary because the run game was king. So now that the passing game is king, and the money ties in too, because if you don't put up the numbers, you don't get the money. And the money is so extraordinary now that your production is tied to what you're going to get paid. So these guys are demanding the ball. And when they're demanding the ball, what are they really demanding? They're demanding the money.
So, okay, a couple questions here. When you talk about a diva wide receiver, it's not just the position that they play. There have been some really good receivers. Some would say, all pro level, Hall of Fame level, that I would say were not divas. They were just receivers. I'll give you two off the top of my head: Julio Jones and Larry Fitzgerald. Like, they are pros. They got paid. They got what they deserved. Did they win a Super Bowl? No. But at the same time, I wouldn't call them a diva. Would you agree or disagree with that sentiment?
Agreed.
Okay.
And you could throw guys like Cooper Kupp, Hines Ward,
for sure,
who did win Super Bowls in there as well.
So there's something about these, like the diva. So let me ask you a couple questions here. What about Jamar Chase? Would you put him in the diva category?
I haven't seen or heard anything from Jamar Chase that would lead me to believe that. For me, diva means not just that you want the ball. Like if you want Jamar Chase to want the ball.
For sure.
But diva tends to me to mean that you not only do you want the ball, but you're also not willing to do some of the other things that are expected of you. And if you don't get the ball, then you will become disruptive. And that's where I think it is the problem.
So let's call them out here. Who are some of the divas in today's NFL that you would categorize as such?
Well, I think the Steelers moving on from Pickens was very telling because they obviously didn't believe that they could succeed with him on the field or off the field. So that was a big deal. I think Brandon Ayuk and what he did in San Francisco was extremely disruptive. And the 49ers have suffered as a result of it. I mean, I don't know if I would call Deebo Samuel a diva, but he allowed his selfish desires to get in the way of what might have been best for the team there. I mean, those are a couple guys that off the top of my head come to mind. Who can you think of?
What about Tyreek Hill? Would he fall into that?
That's a good question. He's always been really good on the field. He's got a lot. It seems like he's got some personal issues outside of the organization. I don't think I've ever heard stories about him being disruptive to the organization in Kansas City or Miami. And I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, the Chiefs traded him for a reason in his prime. So maybe there were some issues in the locker room that I'm just not aware of.
Yeah. And few folks need to remember, players can change. They can change into a diva. When Antonio Brown was selected by the Pittsburgh Steelers and he was primarily a kick returner and punt returner, he was not a diva. He did not walk into that locker room and say, like, everyone look at me. He came in as this really humble 6th-round draft pick out of Central Michigan, and then it turned into AB.
Well, when did he change, Jeff? When did he change?
When he got paid.
When he got paid. And he went right out to that practice and he trash talked Dick LeBeau of all people. And then every member of the defense wanted to kill him. And that was like
Troy Polamalu. Troy Polamalu. The last question about diva-like behavior. Can give me a name, and this doesn't have to be recent. I'm trying to think of, because we automatically think of, in those early 2000s might have been the most diva-centric era of receivers ever. When you talk about T.O. and Chad Ochocinco, and I mean, you want to bring out even, who was the guy that took, oh my gosh, Horn? Is it Joe Horn that took the cell phone out?
Joe Horn. That was one of the greatest celebrations of all time.
What about some give me a non-receiver that might have been considered a diva of any time. Doesn't matter.
A non-receiver. That's a great question. Well, you got some D-backs that are,
Dion.
yeah. I mean, Dion for sure.
Yeah.
I think Jalen Ramsey earns that reputation at times. He's been described as such. Got some of the corners are just wide receivers who can't catch. So no, that's not true. But there are. I mean, I would probably have to do a little bit of thinking on this one to give you some distinct names, but yeah, I think that there are probably some corners who enter the league and say, they say things like, I don't tackle. When you start giving your checklist of things you don't do on the field, you are trending in a diva direction.
That's true. And defensive backs, they are the cornerstone of the house that was built called making a business decision. So
Yes.
for instance, when Deion Sanders was on the outside and someone like Jerome Bettis is barreling down, he's going to make a business decision to dive at his ankles. And if he misses the tackle, so be it. All right. We'll move on from the diva behavior. Let's talk about a guy who's calling it a career, supposedly. Derek Carr retires and is leaving the New Orleans Saints. There are some people that think that he's not done playing, that this was just a way for he and the Saints to kind of part ways. Supposedly, the shoulder injury that he has is going to require surgery. We knew this. We knew his 2025 was in jeopardy. And the Saints, the question now is, where do they go from here?
Yeah.
They now look at a quarterback room of Spencer Rattler, rookie Tyler Shuck, and I don't even know the other guy's name. But coach, what in the heck's going on in New Orleans?
That's a great question. I think what's going on in New Orleans is if we could reduce it to a phrase, they're planning for Manning. So no, I don't even think Manning's coming out next year. But
I don't know.
Yeah, they took Tyler Shuck in the second round. That raised some eyebrows because a lot of people thought maybe he was a little further down. He's certainly going to get a shot. He's 25 years old. He played 6 years in college. So he was in college for 6 years. So it's not like he is unprepared. He's as old as Trevor Lawrence. And it feels like Trevor Lawrence has been in the NFL for a while now. So I think he's probably going to get every opportunity to win that starting job. I would imagine Spencer Rattler will go into camp as the number one guy. I would also think that they're going to bring in a veteran free agent. I mean, off the top of my head, I'm not positive who's available. Is Jimmy G still out there? He feels like a stopgap kind of guy.
I know Carson Wentz is still available. I'm not sure if Jimmy Garoppolo is or not. I think Jimmy Garoppolo signed somewhere. I'm not sure though.
Okay. You've got the Kirk Cousins, his name is always out there. I don't know if New Orleans would help Atlanta out, a division rival, because you're going to have to take some salary either way, one way or the other there. But it feels like this is a transition year. Kellen Moore in his first year, I would imagine, is going to get, unless it's an unmitigated disaster, is going to get more than a year to try to get this right. And the Saints are probably going to look for their franchise guy a year from now, provided Tyler Shuck doesn't shock everybody and kind of light it up. I mean, we don't see it very often, right? A guy taken outside of the first round become the guy. But if it's going to happen for New Orleans, it's going to happen with Shuck.
They're definitely testing this theory of let's just see how many times we can draft a quarterback. They took Rattler, I think that was 2 years ago, maybe. They take Shuck this year. If they take another one next year, there definitely is something to figuring out. And there's some teams, look at what Cleveland did, and they're being made fun of for the most part for taking Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. But I mean, at some point you have to take some swings to actually get a hit or even a home run. And that begs the question to me. It's, let's say they do go with Spencer Rattler in New Orleans. At what point do you say, okay, we got to see what this Tyler Shuck guy can do? We spent a second round draft pick on him. It's not the same, but it's a similar story in Pittsburgh with Will Howard. If Will Howard is just sitting on the bench and doesn't even see the field, well, that's probably better for the Steelers. But at the same time, do you get the evaluation that you need before going into the 2026 draft, where that's what everyone's talking about with that quarterback group? I don't know, Coach. What are your thoughts on the approach to the position? Are you more akin to, hey, let's take as many as we can, or how would you approach it, I guess, if you were in charge?
Well, you make an interesting point about Will Howard, because there were some people who evaluated Howard over Shuck in this last draft. And here Shuck goes in the second round and Howard doesn't go till the 6th. So even if you think Shuck's a better player, it's not by much. There's a very narrow gap between the two. So that's a good question about Pittsburgh, right? Are they going to give Howard a shot? I don't think they are, but not this year anyway. But the pressure's on New Orleans to figure it out right now. I think because you've got so many opportunities, only so many opportunities early on in the draft, and New Orleans is there right now. I mean, they had the number 9 overall pick this past year. They passed on a quarterback. They're going to be bad. They're going to have a top 10, probably a top 5 pick next year. Like, you can't keep swinging and missing. That was actually my call sheet podcast on Monday, was about how if you continue to swing and miss on high draft picks at quarterback, you wind up in NFL purgatory. And we've seen it happen with teams like Arizona and Chicago and Cleveland, et cetera. And the Saints are in danger of being now in that same boat.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how a lot of these quarterback rooms shake out in terms of what they do. New Orleans is one. We know Cleveland is another. Just seeing how do they play this thing out. And Cleveland, I'm just absolutely enamored with in terms of who's the starter. Is it Joe Flacco? Is it Kenny Pickett? Do they keep all 4 quarterbacks? And who's the quarterback that is the emergency quarterback 3? It's going to be fascinating, and we'll talk about that as we get closer to the season. But, we talked about divas earlier, and I don't think anyone ever talks about coaches as being divas, but this guy could be. And that's Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick, although he's like the curmudgeon and everyone thinks he's this grumpy old man, there's a little bit more diva there than you think. He is going to be doing an interview with Michael Strahan on Good Morning America this Friday. And a lot of this is damage control after doing a really bad interview. I think it was last weekend. And his 24-year-old girlfriend, Jordan Hudson. I mean, Coach, this story and this whole thing it's beyond weird. I don't get it. I don't care. But still, does anything about this story pique your interest?
I mean, in the history of unlikely turns, Bill Belichick going from curmudgeon is the right word, right? Going from this taskmaster who so many players came out of New England just being like, this guy is awful to play for. This guy. He's just, there's no fun anywhere. Suddenly pivoting, and then first being like pretty entertaining as a studio guy, which I was shocked by. And now dating this 24-year-old beauty queen who, you were talking about divas. I mean, all these videos of her like on the practice field at North Carolina and telling people what to do and stopping the interview. And nobody could have written this. Nobody could have written this. What the hell is going on with Bill Belichick? Maybe he's just living his best life. Maybe this is the hubris stage where he's like, I've already won 6 Super Bowls. Who cares? I'm going to date a hot 24-year-old and do whatever the hell I want to do. And maybe that's where he is right now. But I do think you used the right phrase. I think this is damage control. He'll go on TV with Michael Strahan, who will probably lob him some softballs and let him kind of answer some simple questions. But this is a strange story, man.
Oh my gosh, it's so weird. But people need to remember, why is all this stuff happening? The dude is selling a book. Okay, so keep that in mind. Like, there is a reason why he's out there. This guy hates being interviewed to his core. I mean, everyone remembers we're on to Cincinnati. We're on to Cincinnati. We're on to Cincinnati interview. He does not like the media. He does not like the press. He has to do this. The Jordan Hudson 24-year-old girlfriend thing, she's like a handler. That's what's odd to me. He almost seems like, I don't know. I can't even put this into words. You just see it from afar. You're only seeing clips on social media and you're not there, but you see him on Instagram with her, and she's just the oddest stuff. Like, what in the hell is going on? Like, this makes no sense whatsoever. But hey, I guess good for him. There was that ring door video that came out 2 years ago, I think, where it showed Belichick leaving someone's house in like the very early stages of the morning. And everyone's like, whoa, what's going on with Belichick? Which, by the way, he was never married. We're going to keep that in. I want to make sure we make that announcement. And come to find out, it was her apartment that he was leaving.
Love comes in many forms, Jeff. Okay.
Oh my gosh. All right. Enough Bill Belichick and his handler, Jordan Hudson. But let's talk last. We're not going to do a player profile. I want to talk to you about the NFL schedule release that is slated to be fully released on Wednesday night. And I'll say this about the schedule. We already know that Dallas is going to kick off the 2025 season on Thursday night. That's going to be electric because that's a division rivalry. I don't necessarily care for the division rivalry in that game, but still, it is what it is. This is, to me, an event that should not be an event, but it just goes to show you the strength of the National Football League. We've known the opponents for months. We've known the division matchups for years since they started into this new format. And yet they make this into something that is, you got to watch. You got to see what's happening. They're teasing games here or there. What do you think about the schedule release, Coach?
Well, first of all, Dallas at Philly
Yeah.
will be like a WWE event. I mean,
Yes.
the Eagles fans will have all day to get all hammered up in the parking lot. They hate the Cowboys. I mean, hate the Cowboys. And so they'll come into that stadium about as riled up, celebrating the Super Bowl championship banner. I mean, throwing George Pickens into the mix. There should be an over-under on 15-yard penalties on George Pickens in that game. I mean, that is going to be a spicy opener. But you and I say this all the time. The NFL has, if there's one thing they've gotten right, it is marketing. They are brilliant at it. And the fact that, yes, that there will be primetime specials dissecting every aspect of this schedule release is very telling. I would imagine, I don't know this for a fact, but I would imagine that they'll probably outdraw like the NBA playoffs on TV when the schedule release comes on. And that's saying a lot.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you could go to lesser events that probably outdraw the NHL or NBA playoffs that are going on right now. And it is insane. It is the next event, and it's actually the last event that the NFL will actually promote outside of like on-field stuff, mandatory minicamp, until training camp in July. And so here we are at the final stepping stone, and we'll be able to talk about some of those games, maybe highlight a few of the games that we were maybe surprised to see, games that we think are going to be the best, primetime games, holiday games, all that stuff. We'll do that next week on the NFL Whip Round. Coach, I want to give you an opportunity to plug what you're doing on the Call Sheet Daily.
Yeah, I mentioned Monday's show, which really took a deep dive on the consequences of missing on a quarterback in the first round of the draft. They are significant. I got a great guest on Wednesday, Chuck Donahue, legendary coach in the state of New Jersey. He's the only coach in New Jersey to take 3 different high school programs to state championships. He's coached NFL. He was Mike Gesicki, the tight end of the Bengals. He was his coach. But he's been coaching for 50 years. 50 years. He's 73 years old. 50 years, and we're gonna talk about how the game of football has changed over his 50-year coaching career. I'm really excited for that one.
Make sure you check that out wherever you get your podcast by searching the Call Sheet Daily. You can check out my work and Kevin's work at the Steel Curtain Network at steelcurtainnetwork.com. And wherever you get your podcasts, Steel Curtain Network, you'll find our Steelers talk there. Coach, thanks for your time. We'll see you next week on another NFL Whip Round. Take it easy.